Hi everyone. So I'm back with another video or rather a video series where we'll discuss and talk about as many concepts as possible for name credentials. Yeah. So before we start, let's check what's the definition of name credentials as per Salesforce official documentation. So I've got it opened here. Yeah. Name credentials intended to secure and simplify authenticated API callouts to external systems. Right? So it says authenticated API callouts to external system. That means this is for outbound integrations, wherein Salesforce is making callouts to external system, right? That means Salesforce here is acting as a client, right? And there is another name for client, you can call it either consumer or source system, and it's trying to make a call out to external system, and we can also call external system as in this case as a server or provider or destination. Yeah. Now let's look at the second part of the definition. So here it is. A name credential specifies the URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication parameter in one definition. So there are two things here: URL of a callout and required authentication parameters. Okay. So for this outbound integration from Salesforce to an external system, there are two prerequisites. Yeah. First one is Salesforce should know the address of the external system, or in other words, it should know the endpoint of the external system so that it can make an outbound call to that endpoint, right? And the second point is, for this integration to work in a secure manner, there should be some mechanism using which Salesforce is able to authenticate itself to the server, so that when server receives the API call from Salesforce, server can verify using some mechanism that this API call is coming from a trusted resource, right? So this second point is about authentication. So name credentials is a feature provided by Salesforce which handles these 2 points. First is the URL of a callout, and the second is authentication parameters in one definition, right? So there are lots of authentication parameters which name credentials supports, okay? And the way I'll try to structure this video series on name credentials is that I will try to go through each authentication parameters in one video if possible. Okay, that's how I'm planning to structure this series. So yeah, let's try to have a quick look at all the authentication parameters which name credentials support. Okay, so let me go here. I think it will be somewhere here. Yeah, authentication protocols for name credentials, right? So if you see here, these are the authentication protocols: AWS signature version 4, then basic, then custom, JOT, OAuth 2.0. Yeah, and inside OAuth 2.0 you see all these authentication parameters supported, then password based. Yeah, so there are a lot of authentication parameters, and this first video will be about custom authentication parameter. Okay, so what's custom authentication? So custom authentication is a mechanism where the client and server define their own rules for authentication or verifying the identity. Yeah. So instead of using standard authentication protocols like OAuth 2.0 or username password based authentication, clients and server come up with their own rule. Okay. And even though we are calling it custom authentication, still in custom authentication also there are certain industry agreed patterns which systems can follow, right? And I've just listed down few of them, like you can use API key based authentication or custom header, encrypted tokens, HMAC signatures, timestamps, or any other agreed upon method. Okay, so what we'll do as part of this video, we'll not go in each of them. What we'll do, we will just focus on API key based authentication. Okay, so what's API key based authentication? It's a simple authentication mechanism where the client sends a unique key, also known as API key, to the server in the API call or the integration call. Yeah, and that API key can be either part of header, or the body of HTTP request, or it can also be part of the URL, right? And which is also called as query parameters. So that API key can be part of any of these three, right? Either header or body or URL. When I say URL, it's basically the endpoint plus some more parameters at the end. So API key can be part of any of this, as per what's agreed between server and client. And in this video, we'll send the API key as part of the header. Okay. Now, I also wanted to touch briefly on what exactly is header and body, right? So as part of any API call or integration call, or what we call as an HTTP request, right? So whenever a client sends some request to server, we call it as an HTTP request, right? So in HTTP request, there are two parts. One is header, one is body, right? Let's not call it headers. Okay. One is header and one is body, right? So what is header? So header is a sort of a metadata. Okay. It tells the server as to how to process the HTTP request. Okay. It's in the format of key value pair. Okay. And body is also in form of key value pair, and it contains the actual payload or the actual business data which the server has to process. So what is header? Header tells the server how to process the HTTP request coming in, right? And body tells the server what to process, right? That is the way you can, understand what is header and body. And for our, for our demonstration, we will pass the API key as part of header, right? Okay. And for our demonstration, of course, we'll use Salesforce as a client, right? And as server, we will use Node.js. Okay. Now you may ask, why Node.js? Why not Salesforce again as a server? Yes, you can use Salesforce as a server as well, and Salesforce as a client as well. But I wanted to keep it clean. In most of the real world implementations, you will see that not both the orgs are Salesforce, right? In an integration. If you're working on outbound integration, then it's better we keep Salesforce as only the client and not the server, because if I keep Salesforce as a server again, then we'll have to go into connected app details and sort of, we'll have to talk about inbound integration as well. It might confuse you guys, right? So that's why the client I'm keeping as Salesforce, but as server, I'll keep Node.js. Okay. Now, how do we achieve this setup wherein Salesforce acting as a client is calling a server, right? So what we'll do in this, we'll write a simple JavaScript code. Okay. So you can see here, there's a JavaScript code, and this JavaScript code will sort of work as our API, which Salesforce will call. Okay. And we'll expose this JavaScript code onto this URL. Okay. Onto this URL. So what we are doing here, we are exposing a JavaScript code as an API in the server, and that JavaScript code will be exposed onto this URL. And how we'll achieve this? We'll achieve this using Node.js. There's a tool called Node.js plus something called ngrok. Okay. Now what I'll do here is I'll not go into details of how I'll configure Node.js and ngrok as of now in the video. As of now, what I'll do, I will show the final configuration, as in the API is already exposed on this URL and Salesforce is trying to hit it. Okay. Because some of you might not be interested in that, right? Most of you might be interested to know the Salesforce side of this outbound integration call, and might not be interested to understand how this Node.js works, how this ngrok works. But still, once we have discussed everything about custom authentication, at the end I will cover how I have configured this endpoint wherein the API is exposed using Node.js and ngrok. Let's have a look at this URL. So this whole URL is called an API endpoint. Okay. And if you look at the first part till here, starting from HTTPS and ending in ngrok-free.app. So this is the base URL part. Okay. And this part is my-API is the route I have defined in the backend. Okay. So this could be anything. My-API could be anything, but it should match what I have defined in my JavaScript code. So I have defined it same, right? My hyphen API. Okay. So what would happen when Salesforce hits this endpoint, right? The control will come to this code. Okay. This code, this part of the code. And in this, whatever statements we have written will get executed. Okay. Now again, you're looking at this code and you're seeing many other things as well. Don't get confused. What I'll do, as I said, right, I'll explain each and every line of this code about Node and about Node.js and about ngrok once we have covered the custom authentication part. Okay, once we have covered and discussed everything about custom authentication, using name credentials, then after that I will explain other statements as well in this code. But for now, what is important here is, if you see, right, when the Salesforce will hit the API, the control will come here, right? And after that, we are doing few things. What are we doing? We are reading, something from the header. Okay, I'll come to this. We are reading something from the header. Console.clear also I'll explain, and then we are logging the header, right? So the first part is not the header. We are logging the API key, right? What we have received in the header, and then also we are logging the full header here. Okay, and then if the API key matches this string, then we are sending back a response that API key verified, access granted, else we are sending invalid API key. Okay, so what it means is, when Salesforce is invoking this API, it should send the API key in the header as this value, SFDC to Node.js. Okay, so this is what I discussed, right? The client and the server agrees on one particular string or one particular key. So in this demo, in this demonstration, we are saying that this is the key which Salesforce should send, and our server will verify it. It will read the key from the header, and if it matches, it will send this response. Okay. So yes, I understand you are seeing other statements as well here, these things and all. I will explain everything in very much detail once we have covered all the concepts of custom authentication. So don't worry about that. And what I'll also do is, while making the outbound call from Salesforce, first I will show it by using only Apex without name credentials. And the reason for that is, I want to show you the benefit of using name credentials. So first I will make the outbound call using only Apex, and then we will see how we can use the name credentials to make the outbound call, so that we can do a comparison as to why even Salesforce has introduced this feature of name credentials when you can make the call using Apex only, right? So I've already prepared a sample Apex code here. So if you see, this is the endpoint. This is the same endpoint which I showed you earlier, right? And we'll do a get call, and this is the header we are setting. So if you remember, I told you, right, headers are key value pair. So this is the key x-API-key, and this is the value SFDC to Node.js, right? And this is what our JavaScript, right, is expecting here. So if you see here, right, this, so what we're essentially doing, we are sending one parameter in the header, one custom parameter in the header. The name of that parameter is x-API-key, and JavaScript here, we will read that x-API-key, right, the value of this parameter. And if it is SFDC to Node.js, then we will say that it is authenticated, API key verified, access granted, else invalid API key, right? So what we are doing here Salesforce and JavaScript, right? JavaScript is what? Our server only here, right? So here Salesforce and JavaScript have agreed that Salesforce will send this value in this parameter of the header, and JavaScript will verify this. So if Salesforce is sending this value, then JavaScript will assume, okay, this is a verified system which is calling JavaScript, right, for the server, and then it sends back the corresponding response that authentication is successful, and the communication can continue. So yeah, and I'm calling JavaScript and server interchangeably. So when I say JavaScript, it's just server. Just assume that is the server, right? It's the API. Okay. And what else I'm doing here? So once we have prepared the header, right, then I'm making the API call here, and then I'm logging the response. So I'm logging two things. One is the status code of the response using this, and one is the actual response body. Okay, and this is for any exceptions. So if I quickly go through this class, right, so first is what? This is class, Apex class, which we have to use to prepare the request, right? So we are instantiating REQ variable, request variable, and then setting the endpoint using this method. and set method, whatever we are doing, right? Get or post or patch, all those things we can do. So we are doing here get, and then this is used to set the header parameters, right? And after that we have to again instantiate a variable or instance of another class called http, and using this instance, right, we have to use this method send and then pass the request variable, this one, and whatever, once you execute this statement, then whatever is the response received, right, we have to store it in an instance variable of this class http response. So this is standard stuff, right? In order to make any call out from Apex, you have to use all these classes, and this is the way you make a call out. Okay, and then in the response we have got some methods: get status code, get body, to get the actual status code returned from the API call, and the body, right? And then again, this is your standard exception handling, right? If there is any exception, then we'll log it. Okay, so let's start with our demonstration. This is our code, custom auth. Custom auth is the class, and the method is call public API. I'll go to debug window, and what I'll do is I will call this method of this class from anonymous code. So let's execute it. And also I have enabled log. Hit on execute. Let's see what it throws. Debug only. It says unauthorized endpoint, please check setup security remote site settings endpoint. What is this error? So this is one of the configurations which we need to do in Salesforce when we are trying to make any API call out. In this example, we are trying to make API call out to this endpoint. What does this mean? What Salesforce is saying here is, if you want to make this API call out via Apex, you need to add this URL, or rather the base URL, in remote site settings. And why is this enforced by Salesforce? This is enforced to avoid any accidental outbound HTTP request. What Salesforce is saying, that if any admin or developer wants to make a call out to an external endpoint in their Apex code, Salesforce wants you to review it once more. It's like a security layer. You review the endpoint. And the way to do it, and the way Salesforce is trying to enforce it, is you add that endpoint in remote site settings. Only if it is added in remote site settings, only then you will be allowed to make a call out to that endpoint in your Apex. So let's go ahead and add this URL in remote site settings. I'll copy this, go to my developer org, setup, remote site settings, and add it here. Any name you can give. Let's write custom auth. That's all. That's fine. Paste this, and I think I missed one P here. I think it should be like this. Let's review it. Yeah. And in remote site settings, we don't need to add the whole URL, just the base URL. So till this point, we have to add. Let's go back, save it. Let's go back to our dev console, close this log, again go to anonymous window, and I'll execute it again. Debug. Yes, this time we have got something different. It says status code is equal to 200. Response body says API key verified, access granted. Let's go to our JavaScript code and see what has happened here. So when Salesforce made an API call to the endpoint, the control came to this JavaScript code. And in this, some statements were executed. And here, so you see here, right, API key verified, access granted. This is what we are seeing in our Salesforce log. This one, API key verified, access granted. this is being returned from this part. That means this condition got satisfied. API key is equal to SFDC to Node.js. And API key is getting set here. So here we are reading this value X API key from the header, which is SFDC to Node.js. If I go back to our code, our class, X API key, this is being set as SFDC to Node.js. We are reading X API key here. If it is SFDC to Node.js, JavaScript is returning this response in the message. Now in the log, you also saw status, right? Status code is equal to 200. From where status code 200 came? We are not sending status code 200 anywhere here. So what's happening here is, when you just execute this command rest.json, okay, in JavaScript, and you do not explicitly mention any status code, then it sends 200. Again, this is a little bit, going into more details about this code, which I'll cover later. Just for now, understand that when you're not setting any status code here explicitly, this JavaScript code will send status code as 200, right? So that's how it's working. Now I want to show you a few more things here. What is this JavaScript code, or rather this API receiving from Salesforce? If you see, we are doing some more things here. Apart from comparing, or rather verifying the API key, we are also doing few more things. So if I go up, first we are pulling out the API key, then it's called console.clear. I will come to this later. You see, we are doing two more things. We are also logging the API key somewhere, and also the full headers. So we are logging the header which we are receiving from Salesforce in the HTTP request, and also we are logging the API key. So where are these things getting logged? We did not see that, right? So these logs are getting stamped here in this window. Okay. So this is command prompt. What is happening here is, my JavaScript code is being run using Node.js. And whatever console.log I put here, that will be shown in this command prompt. Just assume for now, just understand this, it will be shown here in the command prompt. Don't try to make sense of it, how it's working, because as I said, I will explain these things later. For now, just for our logging purpose, understand that whatever console.log we have written in JavaScript, it's appearing in this command prompt. Okay. Let's have a look at the header which is being sent from Salesforce. If you look here, first line is received API key, and second is full headers. What are these? These are actually this statement, received API key, and then the API key. So if I go back, received API key and this API key, SFDC to Node.js. And after that, full headers, request.headers. So what is this? Full headers. Go back here, full headers. So this is the header which is being sent by Salesforce. Now we'll not go into each and every header details. If you see, it's a key value pair, host, then the host name, then things like user agent, this, accept this value, cache control, no cache, content type, all these things. What we are concerned is the custom key value pair which we introduced in the header, which was, if I go back to my code, which was this X API key. We injected this in the header using set header method, X API key SFDC to Node.js. Going back to the command prompt, it's here, X API key SFDC to Node.js, right? So this is the full header being sent from Salesforce, and we are more concerned about this. So let's change this in Salesforce. Let's send it something else. Let's see if it's getting changed or not. And regarding this, right, received API key, this is just, we have pulled out only API key here from the header only. So first we are logging the API key and then the full header, and the full header also contains the API key. What we'll do next is we'll change this value to something else. And what should happen if it is not SFDC to Node.js? Let's go back to our JavaScript code. What should happen? This condition will not get satisfied. It will go in else part. Then it should return this status code as 401 and invalid API key. And we'll also verify this in our console. And that's where this console.clear comes in. What will happen when we again make a call out from Apex? The control will land here. It will do console.clear. That means it will clear this window. It will clear this old data and it will then log the new details. That's where console.clear is being used. We'll see that in action. Let's change the XAPI key value to something else. What should we write? Let's remove JS part. Anything is fine except SFDC to Node.js. Make it SFDC to Node. Let's see. Saved it. Close this log. Open execute anonymous window. Click execute. Debug. Yes. We got 401 as status code and invalid API key. That's what we were expecting. And also let's check in the Node.js side what we received from Salesforce. So I'll go to the command prompt. This is no updated data because of console.clear in the JavaScript code. Look at the received API key. It is the new one, SFDC to Node. And in the full headers also, XAPI key, it's SFDC to Node. And in this code, it has gone to else part, wherein it's returning 401 as status code and invalid API key. This is what we are seeing here. Hope this makes sense. Yeah. Now we will implement the same thing using named credentials. What I'll do, I'll create a new class because I want to keep a reference of the old class. And once we have implemented this callout using named credentials, I want to give you a comparison of the old implementation without named credentials, which is this one, and then the implementation with named credentials. And when using named credentials, we don't need to add the endpoints in remote site settings. So what I'll do, I'll go to the remote site settings and I'll inactivate this. Because when we are using named credentials to make a call out, we don't need remote site settings. So I have inactivated this. Next, we'll create named credentials. Let's jump to our Salesforce org and we'll create a named credentials there. So I'm in setup. I will search for named credentials. Now, when I went into named credentials, you are seeing these entries: name credentials, external auth identity providers. For custom authentication, we will only need to configure external credentials and name credentials. We'll start with configuring external credentials and we will start the implementation. And I'll explain what is the use of external credentials, what is name credentials, why these two entities, how they are linked as we progress in the video. I might not explain immediately, but I will do so at some point in this video. Let's create external credentials. I click on new, give it a name custom auth EC, which is custom auth external credentials. Copy the same name here, authentication protocols. If you remember, in the beginning of this video, I was showing you all the authentication mechanisms or all the authentication protocols available in name credentials. This is the list which I was showing you on the official Salesforce doc. Okay. We will select custom here because we are implementing custom authentication. Click on save. Now we will go to name credentials again and create an entry under name credentials now. Click on new. You can give any name here. It is a label. You can give any label or name of your choice. Custom auth. I will write NC, which stands for name credentials. Copy this same and put it here. URL. Now this URL is the base URL part of the API endpoint. If I go back to my Apex class, this was the URL, this was the endpoint. So in name credentials, we have to enter this base URL part, starting from HTTPS till .app. I'll take this, copy and paste it here. You have to select this enable for callouts because we are using it for callouts. External credentials. Here we have to select the external credentials which we created, which was this one, custom auth EC. Rest of the settings we'll keep as is. For now, I will come to these in this video. I'll explain all these things, but for now, let's keep it default. Click on save. Now that we have created name credentials and external credentials, I just want to revisit the definition of name credentials which we saw in the start of this video. I will go back to the documentation. If you remember this line, a name credential specifies the URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication parameters in one definition. There are two bits here, right? One is URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication parameters. And what we did just now, we specified the authentication parameters in external credentials and the URL of a callout endpoint in name credentials. That's what we did. If I go back, this is our name credentials. Here we have specified the URL of the callout endpoint. And this is our external credential. If I open this, here we specified while creating the authentication protocol, which is custom. So this definition translates into which entity holds the URL of a callout endpoint and which entity holds the authentication parameters. So external credentials are used to hold the authentication parameters and name credentials are used to hold the URL of a callout endpoint. Now let's go back and try to use name credentials to make the callout. What I've done here is, this was our original class where we did not use name credentials. What I've done now is I've created a new class. The original class name was custom auth. The new class name I have kept as custom auth NC. NC stands for name credentials. Right now everything is same here. So if I go back to this class, all the methods, all the statements are same. And this class also holds the same statements. What I'll do now, I'll start modifying this class to use the name credentials. First thing, we have to replace the callout endpoint. Instead of the base URL, what we have to write here now is callout colon and the name of your name credentials. Let's check the name of our name credentials. This is the name, custom auth NC. I'll copy this, go back to my code, paste it, save it. Now let's execute this class and let's see what happens. I have not done much changes in this class. All I have done is replace the base URL with this syntax. This is the syntax which Salesforce has provided to use name credentials. Let's see what happens. I'll open debug window, open execute anonymous. So this is our old class. Now our new class is this. Method name is same. Let's execute this. Debug. We got an error, callout error. We couldn't access the credentials, you might not have the required permissions, or the external credentials custom auth EC might not exist. What's this error, guys? Why is this coming? This is where we start seeing the, you can say, magic of name credentials. It clearly says that you need to have some permission to use this name credentials or external credentials which you have created. There is some permission missing. If I go back to my original Apex implementation, Apex only implementation, there was no such thing. Anyone can invoke this Apex class and can make the API call out. There was no explicit restriction which we put, right? I as a login user was able to make a call out without any restriction. But as soon as I replaced the code with name credentials, I got this error. You might not have the required permission, or the external credential custom auth EC might not exist. It's basically talking about some permission. We will see now what is this and how to resolve this. This is where principals come into picture. Let's go back. This is our external credential, custom auth EC. If I scroll down, there is something called principals here. And this is what will help us to resolve this error. The error says you might not have the required permissions. And using principals, we will give the access to the current logged in user, which is myself in this case. I'll give myself access to use this external credentials or name credentials. Let's configure a principal. Click on new. I will write here anything you can write. It's a name, custom auth P. P stands for principal. Sequence number, let's keep it as 1. And there are other things as well, authentication parameters and all. We'll come to this, but for now, let's save it. Custom auth P. Now what we have to do is, we have to somehow link this principal to my login user. And how we do that is, we will create a permission set and will provide access for this external credentials and this principal to that permission set, and we will assign that permission set to my user. We can also do it via profile, but it is always recommended we do all these things via permission set so that we have more granular control. So what I'll do, I'll also not go via profile. Rather than that, I'll create a permission set and use that to give this access. Okay. So permission set, create a new permission set, custom, any name you can write. I'm just writing custom auth access. We'll select Salesforce as license, click on save. The permission set is created. Now what we have to do is scroll down. There is a section called external credential permission principal access. External credential principal access. Click here. Click on edit. If you see, the first one is ours, custom auth EC hyphen custom auth P. So the first part is the name of the external credential, custom auth EC. The second part is name of the principal, custom auth P. Add it here. Click on save. So this is added. What it has done is, this permission set now has access to this principal, and this principal is part of this external credential. Next, I will go ahead and assign this permission set to myself. Go to settings, advanced user details, edit assignments. Custom auth access. This was the one, right? Custom auth access. Click add, save. Let's go back to name credentials. Let's go to our external credential. This was the one, right? Click. Let's check our principal once again. Edit. If you notice something here, earlier when we created the principal, we gave the parameter name and then we saved it. There was nothing else. But now when we have mapped the permission set to this principal, if I scroll down, you will see what it says essentially is this permission set has got access to this principal. Hope that makes sense. Click on save. Now let's go back to our code. Let's try to execute it again. And one more thing before I execute, you remember I copied the code from our Apex only implementation, and if you remember, I had changed the API key. Initially it was SFDC to Node.js. I have made it SFDC to Node, and I have copied the same here. So you know, right, this one, when we invoke using this API key, it will say invalid API key that we tested in Apex only implementation. We don't want that to happen now. So let's replace this. Make this as correct API key, SFDC to Node.js. Save it. Let's verify it also. It's SFDC to Node.js. I have made the changes. I have made it SFDC to Node.js. Clicked on save. Let's open anonymous window. This is correct class and method. Let's click execute. Debug. You see, we got the correct response, the successful response. If I go back to my console, right, this. Now this is the latest response which we have got. Not the latest response, this is the latest details of call out from Salesforce. And here we are using, we have made this call out using name credentials. So we have got this SFDC to Node.js in the API key, and the same here. And I can show you as well that this is via name credentials class. What I can do is, maybe I'll change it to something like this, NC. Okay. And in the JS file also I have to make it NC so that it looks for the same key. But there's one thing, I'll have to restart my Node.js server. Let me do that. Yes, the server has started running. Now let me execute my code again. Open execute anonymous. Click execute. Debug. API key verified. If I go back to my console, you see SFDC to Node.js NC. So this is coming via the class which is using name credentials. So we have solved the access issue now using the principles. If I go back, right now we are getting this success. I have also opened the previous log, this one, where we were getting this error. You might not have the required permissions. But after giving access to the principal via permission set, this issue is resolved. So what's happening here, guys? Why this concept of principals and permission set? What Salesforce has done as part of name credentials feature, Salesforce has introduced one more layer of security. What it is saying is, if you want to make a call out using name credentials, external credentials, you must have permission to it. You must have permission for making that call out. And that's where Salesforce has introduced a concept of principals. And using that principle, you can map either a profile or a permission set for that user, so that the user has access to make that call out. It's more of a security layer introduced by Salesforce in the name credentials feature. Now next we'll see how to send the API key using external credentials rather than Apex. Right now we are sending API key here in Apex. What I'm gonna do next is I will use external credential to send this API key, and I'll comment it from here. So let's comment it from here. Go to our external credential. This is our external credential, custom auth EC. If you scroll down, there is a section called custom headers. Here you can add any custom header you want to send as part of the HTTP request. Click on new. We will keep the same name, x-API-key. Value also as same, whatever it's here. Save it. Now we have configured a custom header here with the same key, x-API-key, and the value as SFDC to Node.js NC. Now let's make the callout again from our developer console. This is the Apex class. We have commented the header from here. Go to execute anonymous window. We'll execute this. But before that, one thing I just want to show here. If you remember, earlier we were doing console.clear because we wanted to keep the console clear every time a new API call happens. But I feel that's not helping a match, because it's better if we are able to see the old response, or rather the old header details sent from Salesforce, and at the same time when we are looking at the new details, so that we can do a comparison. So that's why what I have done is I have commented console.clear, and right now what you're seeing here is a previous request, previous header details from Salesforce, and right now the server is waiting for the new callout from Salesforce. So let's go back here. Okay, now I'll make the callout. Execute. Debug. API key verified, access granted. If I go back to console, you see we have received the details for the new request from Salesforce, and if you see, we have got the API key again, correct API key, which we configured in external credentials. Here also, if you see, the API key is SFDC to Node.js NC. Right. So what we have done here is, what we achieved here is, we moved the code to set the API key from the Apex to external credentials, or rather from Apex to configuration. Okay. Now, before we proceed with named credentials, I wanted to discuss on a couple of things which we have achieved using named credentials. The first point is, if I go back to my Apex only implementation, you see we had to hardcode the base URL in the Apex, which in itself is not a best practice as per Salesforce. We should avoid such hard codings in Apex. We should try to save things like URL, etc. in config rather than in Apex, because in an odd case, if the base URL changes, then we don't want to come to the Apex, and every time the URL is changing, we don't want to come to the Apex and modify the code, right? What we want is that a config should be able to handle this. So what we achieved here as part of named credential is, we were able to save this base URL in a config, right? So we replaced this code with this syntax, wherein custom auth NC was name of the named credential, and we were able to save the URL here. So in future, if the URL changes, we have to just make the config change rather than Apex code change. So that is the first benefit which we have achieved using named credential. And again, on the similar lines, if I go back to my Apex only implementation, here we were setting the API key also in the code, and this also in our named credential implementation, we commented from here, and we were able to save it in the external credential. If I go to the external credential, this is the external credential. So we moved this also from Apex to a config. So what's the benefit? Because these are keys, right? These are API keys, and generally these keys are changed after certain interval of time, like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. So every time this keys change, we don't want again to come back to Apex and make code changes every time the keys change. So again, here also we were able to move this to configuration. So if the key changes, all we have to do is come back to the external credential and update the key, rather than going to the Apex code every time and make the modifications. And even though we managed to move the API key from Apex to config, still there is a small problem here, which both config and Apex are not able to address. And the problem is, this API key is a sensitive information. It is used for authentication. So it should not be lying in the system exposed like this. So whether it's Apex, so here also, right, in the Apex only implementation, if I go back, here also it was exposed like this, right? And if I go back to config, here also it is just lying there, for anyone to just have a look and get the secret key, which is not correct. There should be some way to store this secret key in a secure manner. And that's where we'll see one more benefit of using named credentials. We will achieve this using principals. So we already created one principal with this name, custom auth p. Let's go and edit the principal. Now, if you see here, there's something called authentication parameters. We'll make use of this feature. Click on add. We will add our API key here. Now here name we can give anything, like API key. I will just give API key. Okay. And the value I'll copy the same value. This is the value, right, which we were using in our external credential. Paste. If you see, when I pasted the value, it got masked. We are not able to see what value would be pasted, even though I have pasted the same value and it is saved. So when I click save here, it got saved. And if someone navigates now here and clicks edit on principal, the value is masked, right? It masked. So whosoever is navigating here, he'll not be able to see what was the actual API key which was saved here, right? So we have achieved some level, some level of security here. Click on save again. And now, how do we access this key which we have saved in principal? How do we pass this key in the header of our HTTP request from Salesforce to Node.js? And the way to do is by using formulas in custom header. And now, this is one of the very important features of named credentials, a feature which I personally like. I have used it and I personally like this feature. You can use formulas in custom headers. And now using formula, I'll show you how do you fetch the API key which we stored in the principal. Okay. Let's modify this custom header. Let's remove this. Now I have already prepared the formula. I just paste it here. This is the formula. So what it is? This part will always remain same. This exclamation, dollar and credential. What it is saying is we have to refer something from external credentials. So that's what it is saying essentially. After that, you have to give the name of your, After that, you have to give the name of your external credential. This is our external credential, right? Custom header EC. And after that, you have to give the name of the authentication parameter. So if you remember, when I was creating authentication parameter in the principal, I gave the name as API key. And this is what is holding our actual API key value, which is nothing but this SFDC to Node.js NC. So if you write like this, if you write the formula like this, then it will resolve at runtime. When Salesforce makes the HTTP call, it will resolve at runtime. Resolve as in it will evaluate this formula. It will go to the external credential, and it will go to the principal, and then it will look for this authentication parameter API with the name as API key, and then it will fetch the value from there. Okay, let's see if this works. Right, so it is saved. Now one more thing, now on this page, are you able to see the API key anywhere? Here also it's not visible, and I showed you already here, right? In the principal, if you click on edit, there also it is masked. So you're not seeing the API key anywhere. So we have securely stored the API key. Now let's make the call out from our anonymous window and see if this works. Let's go back here, debug, open execute anonymous. It's a correct class. Let's click on execute. Debug. It did not work, right? It is saying 401 invalid API key. So what happened here? If I go back to my JavaScript code, it went in this part. Response is 401 and result is invalid API key. That means this condition was not satisfied. So what did we receive as API key? Let's check our console. So this is the latest API key, right? So this is the latest one. This one was previous one where we were receiving SFDC to Node.js NC. This is the latest one, this one. And if you see, we have received the whole string. It's not the value, it's the formula itself we have received. And if you see here XAPI key, here also we have received the formula. Whatever we wrote here in the external credential, it did not evaluate or resolve at the runtime. What's the issue here? If I go back, it did not evaluate. It should have idly evaluated to, this should have idly evaluated to this value, right? SFDC to Node.js NC. We will fix this. Okay. How to fix this is, so right now we are in external credential. Let's go to our name credential. This is the name credential, right? In the related, so whenever you create external credentials, there is a related list called related name credential, wherein you can see the associated name credential. So this is the name credential. Let me open this. We have to make a change here. If you remember in the starting, I told you I'll go through certain things, these options, right? So let's click on edit. And if you see, there's something called allow formulas in HTTP header. We have to click this option. This is what, if this is checked, only then the formulas will evaluate in runtime. Okay. So I have checked this, click on save. Now again, we will make the call out. Let's go back to our dev console, open execute anonymous. Let's check our, this is our Node.js console, right? So right now we received this. Okay, let's make the call out again. Let's see. Execute. Debug. Field custom header ec.api key does not exist. So there is one more error. Let's see what's that error. It says custom header ec. Okay, I get it. I think I gave the wrong name of external credential. Let's go back to our external credential. So we are right now in name credential. You can see here is the external credential. Let's click on this. What's the name of our external credential, guys? It's custom auth ec. I copied the wrong name, right? If I come where I have copied custom header ec. Let's change this. Edit. Custom auth ec. Save. Now let's make the call out again. Should we uncheck the formula again here? Let's do that. Let's do it from start. Uncheck this option in name credential. I have unchecked. Now let's go back to our debug. It will not work. It will again give the formula, but I just wanted to, do that again. That step. Execute. Invalid API key, which was expected. If I go back, yes, this is the latest one, right? So again, we are getting the whole formula rather than it getting evaluated at runtime. So we're getting custom auth ec.api key. Now let's go back to name credential. This is our name credential. Click on edit. Allow formulas in HTTP header. Click on save. Let's make the call out again. Open execute anonymous. Execute. debug. Yes, we got the correct response. Now let's go back to our console, Node.js console. So this one was previous one, right? If I scroll down, now we have got the correct value, SFDC to Node.js NC. Here also SFDC to Node.js NC. So what we achieved here is we were able to first securely store the API key, and then let me go to external credential. So this is external credential. We saved the API key securely here, right? It's masked, and then we fetched the API key in the custom header using this formula, and it only worked when in the name credentials we checked that option. Let me go back to name credential. This is name credential. When we only, after we check this option, allow formulas in HTTP header, only then it worked, right? So this is an important and very useful feature of name credential. This allows us to use formulas in name credentials. Hope this helps. Yeah. And one more point, guys, I just now realized that this option, generate authorization header, got unchecked. Because I remember when I created this name credential, this was checked by default, but at some point in the video, it got unchecked. But don't worry about it. This won't make any difference in the custom authentication flow. So don't worry about this option getting checked or unchecked. Okay. And also, if you are paying attention to this URL, you will see that this URL will change a couple of times during the course of the video. Why this is happening is because, as I mentioned earlier, right, this URL I am generating using a tool called ngrok. And during the course of the video, sometimes I stop the tool and then restart it. So every time I restart that tool, it gives me a new URL. So you will see, if you notice this during the course of the video, you will see it changing a couple of times. Again, don't worry about that. It's just that when I'm pausing the video or restarting the ngrok tool, for whatever reason, it gives me a new URL. So that's the reason you might see this URL changing a couple of times in the video, or more than that. Okay. Next, I'll demonstrate a use case in which, based on which user is logged in, the code will dynamically pick the principals under name credentials. Okay, so let's first understand the use case. So from Salesforce, when admin users make call out using the name credentials, then the API key which will be sent in the header will be this SFDC to Node.js admin user. And Node.js will receive this API key. And if the API key is SFDC to Node.js admin user, Node.js will return back this response, admin access granted. And if non-admin users make call out, so in our case, let's call non-admin users as standard users. So if standard users make call out, the API key which should be sent in the header will be SFDC to Node.js standard user. Node.js will receive the header, and then if the API key is SFDC to Node.js standard user, then Node.js will send back this response, standard access granted. Okay, so this is the use case. So for this, I have modified the code a bit in Node.js side. So I'll open this VS Code. So this is our code, right? So if you remember, I have modified this part. So I have added an else if condition here. If you see what's the updated code, if API key is SFDC to Node.js admin user, then return back admin access granted. Else if API key is SFDC Node.js standard user, then return back standard access granted. Okay, so that's the change I made in the Node.js side. Okay, now coming back here in the Salesforce side, which users will say as admin users, which users will call as admin users, and which users will call as standard users. So for our use case, what I have done, I have created two permission sets. One is call out permission set for admin user, and I have assigned this to one of the admin users, one of the users, and then there is another permission set, call out permission set for standard users. So what it is, in our case, if any user has got this permission set, call out permission set for admin users, we will say that user is an admin user. And if any user has got this permission set, call out permission set for standard users, we will say that user is a standard user. Okay. Now, if we wanted to achieve this use case using the Apex only implementation, how we would have done this? If I go back to the code, so this was our Apex only implementation. correct? So if this use case we want to implement using just Apex, so what we would have done, we would have somewhere in this code, we would have got the all the permission set assigned to the current user, and if one of those permission set was either this or this, then based on that we would have written an if else condition. So if a user had this permission set, then we would have written in condition to send API key as this in the header. If the user had this permission set, then we would have sent this API key in the header. So it was like in the Apex only implementation, there were too many logic which we would have to write. First check whether it has got their permission set, and then based on that write an if else condition to set this header. Now I will show you how we can achieve this using name credentials without even writing a single line of code. What I mean is, so this is our name credentials class, right? So we'll not write any code here, will not include any more code here for this use case. Still we'll be able to achieve this requirement. Okay, I have already created the permission sets and the users for this use case. I will show you what they are. So I have created two permission set. One is this callout permission set for admin user, and the next permission set is this callout permission set for standard users. And there are two users as well. One user is Aniket admin user. So this is the user I'm currently logged in with, Aniket admin user. And the other user is Aniket standard user. So I have created one more user in my developer org. What I will do, first to Aniket admin user, I will assign this permission set, callout permission set for admin user. Okay, we can do it from here also, manage assignment. Add assignment, Aniket admin user, right? Next, assign. This is done. Now I'll go to the other permission set, callout permission set for standard user, and I'll assign the other user to this permission set. Add assignment. This one, Aniket standard user. Next, assign. Done. So we have assigned the permission set to the corresponding users. Okay. Next, we'll go to the name credentials, or rather the external credential. So I'm in my external credential, custom auth EC. What we'll do here is, we already had this principal, correct? We will delete this principal. Delete. We'll create principals again. First principal, admin user principal, P for principal. And in this we'll give authentication parameters, API key, value as what? Go back to JavaScript, this value. Copy pasted, save. I will create one more principal. I'll call it as standard user P, authentication parameters, API key as this value. Okay, SFDC to Node.js standard user. Paste, save. What we have done is, we have created two principals, one as admin user principal or admin user P, and standard user P. In admin user P, the API key we have given as SFDC to Node.js admin user, and for standard user principal, we have given the API key as SFDC to Node.js standard user. And if you remember, we are pulling that API key using this formula. right? This is the API key variable which is being referenced from these principals. Okay, now what we'll do next, we will assign these principals to the permission set. So let's go back to our permission sets. So this was for admin, right? Call out permission set for admin user. Scroll down, external credentials principal access. Edit. This is the one, right? First one, custom auth EC admin user P. Assign this one here, save. Done. Go back to the other permission set. Call out permission set for standard user. Here we'll assign the other principal. Edit. This one, custom auth EC standard user P. Save. Done. So what we have achieved, if I go back to the diagram, I have created an admin user, I have a standard user, I have assigned this permission set to admin user, I have assigned this permission set to the standard user, and also in the name credentials, in the external credentials, we have created two principals, right? And given access to these principals, or rather map these principals to the permission sets. So if I open it now, click on edit, admin user P is mapped to this permission set, and standard user P is now mapped to this permission set. Okay, now what I'll do, we will execute this now. So right now I'm logged in as, let me see, Aniket admin user. Okay, and Aniket admin user has got this permission set, and this permission set is mapped to this principal. And in this principal, what is the API key we are setting? This SFDC to Node.js admin user. Okay, so what I'm do, I'll execute this code now. Let's see what happens. Let's execute this. Before I execute this, you can see here is my Node.js terminal where we'll see what is the header details we receive from Salesforce. Okay, and this is the correct class. Let's execute it. Debug. Admin access granted. Right, let's see what are the headers we got. This is the API key, SFDC to Node.js admin user, and you can see it here also, SFDC to Node.js admin user. So that means when I made this call out, if I go to the external credential, that means when I made this call out, when this formula was executed, it pulled out which API key from the principal? It pulled out from this one, right? Admin user P, because in this one we had saved this API key, SFDC to Node.js admin user. Okay, even though there were two principals, it pulled out this one. Okay, let's execute the second scenario. Now what I'll do, I will log in as the other user, the standard user. So users, I will make use of Salesforce Inspector Reloaded tool. So this is our standard user, right? Aniket standard user. Click this, we'll get this option, login as in incognito. Click this. Okay, now I am logged in as Aniket standard user. Let's open debug or developer console. Let's execute the same command here. Let's copy from the other window this. Let's go to this one. This is for standard user. Paste, open log, execute. Debug. Standard access granted. Let's go back to our Node.js. You see, this is the latest one, right? SFDC to Node.js standard user. So this time the API key resolved to this value, right? And if I go back to the JavaScript code, so when the API key was this value, we got this as a response. When API key was this value, we got this as a response. So what happened here? What happened was when I made the call out using Aniket standard user, this formula pulled out the API key from this principal, even though we did not specify anything. So what is happening here, guys? What is happening? What is happening here is based on which user has logged in, what Salesforce is doing here, it's checking, it's trying to figure out which principal to pick for this formula. Okay, it's trying to figure out which principal to pick from here. And we have already mentioned the permission set, or rather mapped the permission set to these principals, right? So what it is doing is, if the current logged in user has this permission set, then it's picking this principal, admin user P. And if the current logged in user has this permission set, then it's picking standard user P. So we achieved this, dynamically selecting the principal without even writing a single line of code. Isn't it a good use case? Isn't it a good feature of name credentials? So these scenarios can happen in real world projects, wherein based on which set of users are calling, we want to send one API key and get back certain set of results. And if some other set of users are calling, making the call out, then we want to send some other API key and get back some other set of results. So this is the way you can achieve this just by config without writing even a single code. Salesforce can pick based on the permission set assigned to current user, right? So this is a good use case and a good feature of name credentials / sectional credentials. Next, I want to demonstrate one more variation of formula which we can use in the custom header. Okay, if you remember, we had two users, Aniket admin user and Aniket standard user. If you look, the profile of Aniket admin user is system administrator. Profile of Aniket standard user is system admin clone. Now my requirement is that if the user who is making the call out, if his profile is system administrator, then I want to send one more key in the header with the name as user-type. And its value will be admin if the profile of current logged in user is system administrator. Else, the value of that key would be non-admin if the profile of the current logged in user is anything other than system administrator. And we will achieve this again by using a formula in the header. Now you may be wondering, how do we construct a formula? So there is a simple way. You can use the formula builder which we use while creating formula field under any object. Okay, so what I've done here is I'm right now in account object. I am in the process of creating a new field, a new formula field, and I'm in this page. So now if you wanted to create a formula for the requirement which I just mentioned, how will you do it? In the functions, you will say if logical test, you will say profile name you need. So we'll go here, profile name, insert. If profile name is equal to system administrator, what value you want to set? Admin. Else, non-admin. We'll do check syntax. Just move the spaces. Check syntax. No syntax error. Now, how do we use this in our name credentials or external credential? I've copied this. I'm back in my external credential. I will create one more custom header here. I will name it as user type. Then I'll paste the formula, but you have to do a couple of more things. You have to enclose this within curly braces and then put an exclamation mark here. Okay, then save it. Okay. Now, right now I'm logged in with Aniket admin user, which is having this profile, system administrator. So if I make a call out now, in the header, we should get this new key user type and the value should be admin. Let's check that. So this is our code, custom auth NC. And this is our terminal, Node.js terminal. Let's execute this. Open execute anonymous window, custom auth call. Admin access granted. So this was working before also, admin access granted. We have not made any changes in that part. But let's see in the header, did we receive anything? There's the latest one. You see, we received user type, a new key, and the value is admin. Why? Because right now I am logged in as admin user and this formula is evaluating to admin. What if I log in as non-admin user? That is with this user, Aniket standard user, because the profile is not system administrator here, it's system admin clone. So let's log in with this user. Aniket standard user, this one, log in as incognito. I'm logged in as this user, Aniket standard user. I'll open developer console, debug, open execute anonymous window. I will copy the command from here, copy it. Now I will execute it here. What is the expectation? I have not yet executed it, but the expectation is once I execute it and I see this headers, user type should be non-admin. Why? Because right now the user who is logged in, his profile is not system administrator. So let's check that. I'm executing it. Execute. This is again the previous logic. Let's go back to our console. Now this is the latest one. You see, user type is non-admin. Here it was user type is admin. That means our formula, this formula is resolving successfully. So this is another use case. You can use more variations of formula in this as per your requirement. And a simple way is to construct the formula, you make use of the formula builder, which is there in fields of object. However, I feel there are certain limitations to this. You cannot use many complex formulas here, but there are certain, formulas which can be used in name credentials or external credentials. So just do some research on that, like what sort of formulas can be used and what sort of formulas can't be used. But yes, I have showed you a couple of use cases wherein you can use the formula. So whenever you have certain requirements, just do some research or hit and trial and try to understand what sort of formula you can use in your implementation or requirement. Now till this point, I have been demonstrating sending keys in the header. I also wanted to show you that we can send information in body as well, body of the HTTP request. If I go back to my code, here we were just setting header, right? Header either from the code, this header, or in our name credentials also, or external credentials also, we were just setting headers. What about body? What is possible to set in the body? So we'll have a brief look at that as well. And what I'll do, till now we were doing get request. So in get request, body is not relevant because you're trying to get an information from external system. So there is no point of sending any body. Body comes into picture when you're actually trying to post some information. For example, you're trying to insert some information, insert some data into external system or update some data, right? So in those scenarios, body come into picture. So rather than get, now we'll do post. For that, I have already created a sample code. It's more or less same. It's just that we are also, now it will be using a post request and we'll be setting body as well. So this is my code. If you see right now, I'm just setting a key value in the body. Key name will be X body key and the value will be body key for admin. Okay, this is the variable which will hold this value, and we will set using this command request.setBody and this variable body. Okay, I have also just created one more JavaScript code which will traverse the body as well. So this is a bit updated version of the previous code. In this we are logging the body as well, and the rest of the things are same. Like if the API key is this, then return this. If API key is this, then return this. But we are also logging the body here. Okay. Now let's go back to our this new code. The class name is custom auth nc post. And let's see if we execute this, what happens. How will the header and body information look like in Node.js console? Let me execute this. Custom auth nc post, right? This is the new class where we'll be doing post method and sending some body as well. Click on execute. Admin access granted. As I said, this part I haven't changed. So right now I'm logged in as admin user, so I'm getting this admin access granted. But if I go back to my Node.js console, this is the response, latest response. So rest of the things are same, like received API key and full headers, but in my JavaScript, I included this extra line, request body, right? So if I go back to JavaScript, this extra console I'm doing, I'm also logging the body. So this is the body, and if you see, it's the same thing which we sent from Apex, X hyphen body hyphen key, body key for admin. This is what we sent from here, right? X body key for admin. So in this way, we can set the body. Now this is pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward implementation. We just created a string and we set in the body. Now let's try to enhance this using name credentials or external credentials. Let's try to see what all things are possible for the body part using external credentials, right? Let's modify this use case a bit. Now the updated use case is, if I'm logged in as admin user, then in the body, I should set this key, X body key, as body key for admin. If I'm logged in as non-admin user, this key should be set with some other value. Let's say it should be set with body key for non-admin. Okay. How we will achieve this? What we'll do, we will make use of the principles here again. If you remember, in our external credential setup, we had created two principles: admin user P, which was mapped to permission set, which is assigned to my admin user; standard user P, which is mapped to the permission set, which is assigned to my non-admin user, the other user. So what I mean is, admin user P is mapped to the permission set assigned to this user, which is nothing but the user I'm currently logged in with. And standard user P principal is mapped to the permission set assigned to this user. So this we have already done, right? This use case we have already seen. We have done all the mapping and assignment. Now for my current requirement, what I'm saying is, if I'm logged in with a user which is an admin user, right? So for us, if you remember, which user was admin user previously? It was the user which had this permission set, right? So what I'm saying is, essentially what it means is, if a user who is making the call out has this permission set, which is, it becomes an admin user, then in the body, we set this key, body key for admin. However, if the user who is making the call out has this permission set, call out permission set for standard user, that means he's a non-admin user. In that case, this X body key should be set with this value, body key for non-admin. Hope you got the requirement. So essentially what we are saying is a user who has this permission set, if they make a call out, they should the body key should be one value. If a user who is having this permission set, if they make a call out, then the body key should be another value. So how do we achieve this? We will again, as I said, both the permission sets are mapped to their respective principles. So we'll make use of this principle again. So what I'll do, click edit, click add. I will add one more body key. And here I will paste the value for admin, body key for admin. Paste. Done. And for non-admin, I will add it in this principle. Add body key for non-admin. Right. Now, how do we refer this body key which we have added in the principle in the Apex code? How do we fetch this value in the Apex code so that we can set it in the body while making the HTTP request? Now, one thing we know that based on the user login, we know that the principal will be picked dynamically. The principal will be selected, that we have already tested before. For example, if the Aniket admin user is logged in and I'm making call out using Aniket admin user, we know from our previous example that this principal will be picked up. And if I'm logged in using Aniket standard user and I make a call out, then this principal will be picked up. That we already know from our previous example. Now the question is, how do we refer this parameter which we have created, body key parameter, in the Apex? And the way to do it is using again the formula. So we already used this formula syntax to fetch the API key parameter in the custom header in our previous example. Now this same format we can also use in the Apex to fetch the parameters from principals. So let me show you. I have already prepared the syntax here. Copy this. What we'll do, we'll comment out this line and then paste this. What we're doing here, string body, this key remains same, X body key, which will be sent in the HTTP request body. And now this formula, if you look at it, it is same, the syntax is same as what we used in the custom header. So in custom header, we use this formula to refer API key. But here, since we have created new parameter with the name of body key in the principal, we will use this syntax to refer the body key. So rest of the syntax is same, credential.custom.auth. It's just that this parameter name will change. And this way we can refer the parameter from the principal in the Apex. Now what will happen if I make a call out? Okay, so currently I'm logged in with Aniket admin user. That means this principal will be picked up when I make a call out. And in this principal, the value of parameter body key is set to this body key for admin. So ideally, if everything works fine, then in the body, this key should appear with the value as body key admin, because this parameter in the corresponding principal holds this value body key for admin. So let's see, let's make the call out and we will see the header and the body appearing here in the Node.js console, right? So let's make the call out. Debug. Yeah, this is the correct class. Execute. Okay, we got admin access granted because this is working from our previous example. But what we want to understand is what we sent in the header. What is the value of this key in the, not header, what is the value of this key in the body? Let's go to Node.js console. This is the latest one, request body. So what's there, guys? This is the formula itself. The formula has not resolved. What you are getting here is same as what you wrote here. It's the same thing. The formula is not resolved. That means we are missing something. And I'll tell you what we are missing. Let's go back to our name credentials. So this is external credentials and I have got my name credentials open here. This is name credential. Here, if you remember, there was one more setting, allow formulas in the HTTP body, right? And this is what will make this work. Check this, save, click here. Let's rerun this. Before I rerun, right now in the body, we are saying the formula is not resolved. It's a variable itself. Now let's execute. Execute. Debug. Field custom auth EC body key does not exist. Check spelling. Did we do something wrong? Let's check. Custom auth EC body key. Let's check. Let's go to our external credential. Let's check what happened here. Edit. Body key looks fine. Looks fine. What's the name of the external credential? Let's verify that. Custom auth EC. Everything looks fine, guys. Why it's not working? What about the syntax? Is it this K? Is it case sensitive? Let's check. Here I have given capital K. What about here? Here I have given small k, right? This one. Maybe this is what is causing the issue. Control. Let's make it small k. Let's try again. Yeah. So one more learning. It's case sensitive. Guys, the authentication parameters in principle is case sensitive. Good. Now admin access granted, which was expected. But what happened in the console? Did it resolve this time? This is the previous one. This was the previous one, right? Which did not resolve. This time it resolved. It resolved, right? Body key for admin. Great. It worked. Now let's quickly test with the other user as well. It should, for other user, we have set the body key parameter to body key for non-admin, right? If you remember. So let's quickly log in with the other user. Aniket, standard user, login as incognito. So when I execute using this user, you already know which principal will be picked, right? This principal. And in this principal, what is the value of body key parameter? It's body key for non-admin. That's what we saved. So let's see. Open dev console. Debug. Let's copy the command from this window, paste it here, open log, execute, debug, standard access granted. This is expected from our previous example because we logged in using Aniket standard user, right? So this is working from our previous example. But what have we received in the body this time? This was previous one when we logged in using Aniket admin user, and you can see here body key for non-admin. This is what appeared in body when we logged in using Aniket standard user, right? So what happened here, guys? So we were able to use the formula in the Apex, right, to dynamically pick the principal based on the logged in user, and it only worked when we check this option, allow formulas in HTTP body. So this is also a pretty good use case to understand how to use formulas in the Apex. So in the Apex, I showed you to use formula and set some value in the body. You can use it to set in the body plus header, but in any case, these two options should be checked. So whenever you want to use formula either in header or body, you have to check these options, right? Now we have covered most of the concept which I wanted to demonstrate for custom authentication. And before we wrap up this video, I wanted to briefly touch on one more point. If you see the structure of name credentials and external credentials, you must have by now understood that one name credential, or rather not one name credential, multiple name credentials can point to one external credential. If you see, this is our external credential and this is the related name credentials. So if you can see, there could be multiple name credentials which can point to one external credentials. And why is it so? So let's go back to our definition of name credentials. So this is the definition we saw in the start of this video. It says a name credential specifies the URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication parameter in one definition. And after going through all the example, you must have now understood that the URL of a callout endpoint is stored in name credentials like this, and the authentication parameter part is mainly stored in external credentials, this one, right? Authentication protocol. So external credentials mainly map to authentication protocol or authentication parameter, and name credentials mainly map to the endpoint URL. So there can be scenario wherein more than one name credentials are mapped to a single external credential, right? And let me explain a small example where it can happen. So I've prepared this diagram. If you see, again, our server or the external system is Node.js and Salesforce is making an outbound call. Now what Node.js has done, it has exposed two APIs. One is get account API, one is get opportunity API. And it is saying that for both these API, Node.js server will have same authentication mechanism, as in you send the API key as SFDC to Node.js if you want to use both these APIs. So since the authentication mechanism is same, right? So we don't need to create multiple external credentials for each API. What we need to do, we need to create one external credential which will hold this authentication parameter. For example, this external credential authentication protocol as custom, and I have already shown you in the principles we can save the API key and how do we refer by formula and by multiple logins. All those things I have already explained. So in this scenario, since the authentication protocol is same, that is Node.js is expecting an API key in the header for both these API, we only need one external credential. But if the complete URL of both the APIs are different, then we cannot use a single name credentials for both the APIs. If the whole URL, right, not just base URL, but the complete URL is different for both the APIs, then in that case, we have to create two name credentials, but both can point to the same external credential. So this is a very simple example wherein one external credential can have many name credentials, or rather the other way around, multiple name credentials can point to one external credential. This is a very simple example. This might or might not actually happen in real world implementations, but you get the concept or you get the idea, right? So if the authentication parameter is same across all the APIs, then you can use single external credential, and if the endpoints are different, then you can create multiple name credentials pointing to the multiple name credentials for each endpoint, and they all point to same external credential. So this is one of the examples or one of the scenarios wherein we have one external credentials and multiple name credentials pointing to that external credential. One more thing I wanted to touch on briefly is we added custom headers in external credentials. We can also add custom headers in name credentials. So it works exactly same way the way it works in external credentials. And the use case can be still, again, it can be same, right? That for this API, Node.js is expecting some very specific header values, header key value pairs, and for this API, it's expecting some other header key value pairs. So in that case, since you will have more than one name credentials, one name credentials per API, so any custom header you want to include for that API, specific to that API, you can include in the corresponding name credentials. And it works in the same way, the way which we saw for external credentials. And here also, if you want to use it, then you have to do this allow formulas in HTTP header for that corresponding name credential, right? So I'm not going to demonstrate this with an example because I believe the current video has already become too long. It's close to 2 hours now. And again, it's the same thing which I've shown you in all the previous examples. So I just wanted to touch on this concept so that you get an idea of these things as well, right? And one more thing, guys, I said in the start of this video that I will explain how this URL was generated, how are we using ngrok tool, Node.js tool, and what is happening in this JavaScript code, right? I told you I'll explain all the statements, each and every statements, and how are we exposing this local JavaScript code on a public URL using ngrok tool. But this video itself has become quite big. It's become quite long. It's about 1 hour, close to 2 hours. And I don't want to spend any more time explaining those stuffs in this video because those are not specific to Salesforce. Those are some generic ideas which I wanted to discuss, or generic concepts which I wanted to discuss about ngrok, Node.js, and about JavaScript code, right? So what I will do, I will not include those things in this video. What I will do, I will create a short video, a separate short video where I'll explain how do you expose a local JavaScript file on a public URL using ngrok tool and Node.js. And I will provide the link to that video in my YouTube channel if you are viewing this video on my YouTube channel, and if you are viewing this video on my website, then also I'll leave a link to that video in the website post. Somewhere in the post you will find the link to that video. Okay, so yeah, I think we are done with the custom authentication protocol for name credentials. It has been a long video, and I will now come up with a new video in some time in which we'll discuss another authentication protocol or another authentication mechanism, right? Thank you. Thanks for watching.